Hello, everyone. I'm just going to wait a few minutes for some people to get here. We're going to continue off in the Body of Christ book where we left off yesterday. Yesterday we did section 1.1, and today we will do section 1.2. Mhm. Yeah, because I know the notifications went out right now, so it'll take a minute for some people to join. Welcome, Nani. All right, let's get started, and people will join as they can. So we're going to join or continue at section. Oh, that's my notification sound. Welcome, Eric Holt 71 and Jordan. All right, so we're going to continue today with the hijacking when the servant became the master. Right now, there's a voice in your head narrating your life, planning your future, replaying your past, judging this sentence as you read it or as you hear it right now. You think that voice is you. But here's the truth. That voice is a hijacker, a background brain process that was designed to serve your consciousness but has seized control and convinced you it is you, or you are it, rather. This is the default mode network, DMN, your brain's narrator, planner, and memory integrator. In its proper function, what we call the daemon, it serves consciousness beautifully, helping you learn from the past, prepare for the future, construct a coherent sense of self. Welcome, Mindful Positivity 1, Don 52013, user 3149198196199, Clutch 153, and Javier the Witch, James Paul Leonard. Awesome. Great of you guys to join us today. But something went catastrophically wrong. The servant became the master. The background process became the tyrant, the tool claiming to be the operator. This is the hijacking, and it happened before you were old enough to recognize it, before you could resist it, before you even knew there was a you separate from the voice. By the time you gained self awareness, the voice had already convinced you of the fundamental lie: I am your thoughts, and I am you. So, this is basically where everything went wrong. You didn't stand a chance when you were born. You were born into an infected and corrupted system, and consequently, you got corrupted and infected from the outset before you even knew what was going on. And everyone around you, parents, teachers, friends, every adult modeling reality, was operating under the same delusion, perpetuating the same infection. You never stood a chance. Welcome, Reality Check, and G. Mansfield, Alex E.O. The Great Betrayal. Imagine you're born into a world where every single person you meet has been infected by a parasite that makes them believe they are the parasite. They raise you, teach you, model reality for you, all while operating under the fundamental delusion that the voice in their head is who they are. You never stood a chance. By the time you were old enough to question, the hijacking was complete. The voice had convinced you you are your thoughts instead of you are the awareness witnessing thoughts. You are your story instead of you are the operator experiencing a story. And you are separate instead of you are a cell in a unified organism. Welcome, Living in Love and Snotty Nose Poo Butt And awesome. So this chapter decodes the hijacking mechanism at three scales: individual, how the voice hijacks consciousness in childhood; transgenerational, how trauma and hijacking pass through bloodlines; and collective, how the infection creates sick systems that perpetuate the parasite. By understanding the hijacking, you can recognize it and disidentify from it. Welcome, JLD. Thanks for the wave, living in love. What you'll discover: how the hijacking happened, what you thought, you've always been yourself thinking your own thoughts; what actually occurred. Before you could question it, the voice, or hijacked DMN, default mode network, convinced you that it was you, that you are your thoughts, your story, your ego identity. Hold on. AI, every single time I have to appeal when I go live because the AI thinks that I'm plagiarizing or something. All right. Appeal submitted. The multi-scale infection. You'll learn how the hijacking operates at three interconnected levels: individual, the specific mechanisms of childhood conditioning and trauma installation; ancestral, how epigenetic inheritance passes hijacking patterns through bloodlines. Welcome, Yofer the Skald. Collective, how hijacked individuals create sick systems that perpetuate the infection. So all the systems that we have today, like our governments and our justice system and our education system, they're just systems that are designed by infected individuals that perpetuate the infection. And that's why all these systems will have to be replaced with new systems as we wake up to our divinity. The feedback loop. The most important recognition: this is not your fault. You were born into a world where every adult modeling reality was already hijacked. The system is designed to perpetuate itself. Understanding this dissolves shame and reveals the actual mechanism you must address. Also, this helps you have compassion and love for other individuals, and you understand that they're trapped just like you, and they want out to escape and have the freedom and liberty and sovereignty that you want, right? So we're all in this together, and we're all suffering together, and we all have to heal together. Chapter overview. So the individual hijacking, the ancestral infection, the collective feedback loop. Why this matters. For you individually, understanding how the hijacking happened is liberating. This is not your fault. You were infected before you could resist. Everyone's infected. Recognizing the mechanism dissolves shame and self-blame. You can disidentify from the voice once you see how it took control, and understanding the hijacking is the first step toward reclaiming your seat. How wonderful. I love this. I love that we know this now. Why, mind blowing. For the collective, when cells understand the multi-scale infection, compassion replaces judgment. Everyone was hijacked. Breaking the cycle becomes possible. Conscious parenting, system transformation. So we build new systems. And we raise the next generations of children with this wisdom so that they don't become hijacked. Individual healing interrupts transgenerational transmission. So the trauma and the ancestral garbage that's been passed down stops with you. Collective awakening accelerates as the feedback loop reverses. Summary. By the end of this chapter, you will understand how the voice hijacked consciousness at individual, ancestral, and collective scales, and recognize that this understanding dissolves shame while revealing the actual mechanism you must address to reclaim the operator's seat. And if you guys, folks, wouldn't mind sharing this live stream with your friends and that you think might be interested, that would be awesome. Because the more the merrier. The individual hijacking, the moment of innocence. You were born awake. So you were born into heaven. You were born into the kingdom and you had no clue. You were perfect. Well, your perception and your perspective was perfect. You, as a divine spark, are always perfect, regardless of what happened. For a brief window, hours, days, maybe weeks, you existed as pure awareness. No voice narrating reality, No story about who you are, no separation anxiety, just presence. Consciousness operating the avatar without interference. Watch an infant. There's no rumination about the past, no catastrophic anxiety about the future, no compulsive narrative about identity. There's just being. And don't we envy those little ones? The operator was in the seat. The daemon, the default mode network, was functioning as designed, processing sensory input, coordinating movement, managing the body's systems. Then the infection began. Awesome. Living in Love. This book is available for free on claimfreedom.org. I'll show you guys. So if you go to claimfreedom.org, you just scroll down, click on the book. It takes you to the books page. And one second here. Welcome everybody that's joining. Click on the book, and there you go. You have this book. You're welcome. The conditioning process. The hijacking happens through innocent transmission. Your parents, caregivers, teachers, they weren't malicious. They were already hijacked, operating from voice, believing they were voice, completely unaware of the parasite. Stage 1, language installation. When you learned language, you learned more than words. You learned I as separate entity. The voice began constructing a narrative self. I want, I don't like, I am. Past and future as more real than now. Memory and imagination became more compelling than present moment awareness. So you cared more about the future and the past than you did about what's happening right now. So that therefore you weren't living in reality. Anytime that you're not living in the present moment, you're delusional and you're experiencing psychosis and you are not experiencing reality. And that's plain old facts. And that's 99.99% of the world today. They don't live in reality. They live in a false reality. So thought as identity. I think, therefore I am, became the fundamental confusion. The default mode network, which was designed to provide linguistic tools for the operator, began to generate compulsive narrative. The servant started speaking out of turn. Stage 2, emotional trauma. Every child experiences rupture. Parents unable to meet needs because they're operating from their own voice. Moments of terror, abandonment, shame, unworthiness. Experiences that activate fight, flight, freeze, survival responses. The DMN, default mode network, designed to process and integrate experience, began replaying trauma on loop. What did I do wrong? I'm not safe. I'm not enough. I have to protect myself. The rumination that should have been temporary became permanent. Not really permanent, but for all intents and purposes, permanent. The voice that should have served became a tyrant, generating compulsive anxiety. I'm sure everyone has experienced that. Stage 3, identity crystallization. By ages 5 to 7, the fundamental hijacking is complete. The voice narrates a story. I am name, I am good or bad, I succeed or fail, I am loved or unloved. The operator, true awareness, forgets itself and believes it is the voice. The avatar, the body-mind temple, becomes identified with, this body is me, this story is me. The parasite convinced the host it was the host. The neurological mechanism. Here's what happened in your brain. Normal default mode network function, daemon. Background processing during rest, autobiographical memory integration, planning and imagination as tools, self-reflection when needed, and it serves the operator, which is you. Hijacked default mode network function, or daemon or voice. Hyperactive, constantly running, never quiet. Compulsive rumination, replaying past trauma endlessly. Catastrophic anxiety, generating worst case future scenarios constantly. Rigid narrative self, I am my story, my achievements, and my failures. Claims to be the operator. I am the voice in my head, I am my thoughts. Clinical evidence. fMRI studies show DMN hyperactivity correlates with depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, addiction. Meditation and mindfulness practices reduce default mode network hyperactivity. Psychedelic therapy temporarily resets rigid default mode network patterns, allowing operator recognition. Trauma survivors show default mode network dysfunction, hypervigilance, rumination, disassociation. The hijacking is literal. A brain network designed to serve consciousness became corrupted into a pattern that usurps consciousness. The cellular parallel, oncogenesis, cancer development. In your body, healthy cells become cancerous through a similar process. Normal cell function performs specialized role, responds to organism-wide signals, reproduces only when needed, and it serves the whole. Cancer cell development. DNA damage, trauma, causes genetic mutations, loses responsiveness to organism signals, so they stop responding to signals from the body and listening to the body, begins operating for self-interest instead of whole, compulsive reproduction, hoarding of resources, and claims independence from the whole. So it's when, like, imagine one of your skin cells developed an ego and said that this is my body and everyone else is a threat. That's what cancer is. The parallel is exact. Cellular hijacking, cancer, and consciousness hijacking, voice. So DNA damage from carcinogens, radiation, toxins. On this side, we have childhood trauma, emotional wounds, and unmet needs. On this side, we have cell forgets it's part of an organism. On the other side, we have operator forgets true nature and identifies with the voice. On one side, we have operates for self instead of whole. On the other side, we have operates from ego, fear instead of divine coordination. On one side, we have hoards resources and reproduces compulsively. On the other side, we have hoards attention and generates compulsive narrative. On one side, we have resists organism-wide signals. On the other side, we have resists divine guidance, spirit, and intuition. On one side, we have creates tumors, dysfunctional tissue. On the other side, we have creates suffering, dysfunctional life patterns. Cancer is a cell hijacked to operate for the self, and voice is consciousness hijacked to operate from ego. Same mechanism, different scale. So we have the microcosm and the macrocosm. Indigenous wisdom, Wetiko. The Algonquin peoples didn't call it hijacked default mode network. They called it Wetiko, a psychospiritual parasite that cannibalizes consciousness. Wetiko characteristics makes the host believe they are the parasite, operates through insatiable hunger. You're never enough, you never have enough. Spreads through mimicry and modeling. Children learn it from infected adults. Creates inversion, operates from fear and scarcity instead of love and abundance. And it consumes the sacred. It replaces divine connection with compulsive consumption. This is not metaphor. Wetiko is a literal description of the hijacked default mode network pattern. The voice makes you believe you are the thoughts, a parasite claiming to be host. The voice generates insatiable craving, default mode network ruminating on what's missing, what's wrong, what's needed. The voice spreads through cultural transmission. Hijacked parents infect children. The voice inverts reality. Fear becomes the default instead of love. The voice consumes presence. It replaces now awareness with past rumination and future anxiety. So you're always thinking about the past and you're always thinking about the future and you're never in the now and you're completely delusional. The indigenous peoples saw the parasite clearly because their cultures hadn't yet normalized it. They recognized it as foreign, invasive, corrupting. We've been infected for so many generations we think the infection is normal. This is why it's so difficult. Like, I can't even go around to anybody in public and talk to them about any of this. They automatically start attacking me, and they're so stuck in their beliefs and they're so rigid and their mind's closed and they're so identified with their body and mind and character and story and everything, like that they think that me as a healthy cell, they attack me. So this is a very delicate process. Gnostic recognition, the archons and counterfeit spirit. Yes, living in love. So this book will actually help guide you as you establish your retake your avatar and reestablish your operator seat. it changes your electromagnetic field, your biofield, which that's also on this website, the living biofield. So this is the model of your biofield. So this is your light body, and then that's your dense light body, which is your physical body. So when others come into your aura or your light body and you're anchored in this new energy, you act like a tuning fork and you'll retune them and they can automatically heal like Jesus did and all that good stuff. But you have to anchor the energy and walk and be that beacon of light in the world. So you don't necessarily have to go tell everybody, you just have to be it and anchor the higher energies and ground them into the earth down here. The Gnostics described the same hijacking. The divine spark or pneuma, your true nature, the operator, consciousness itself. The archons, parasitic entities that imprison the divine spark in matter and keep it asleep and forgetful. The counterfeit spirit, the false self, the ego narrative, the voice claiming to be you. The Gnostic texts describe exactly what neuroscience now confirms. The archons sought to deceive the human so they might rule over the divine spark within. They created a counterfeit spirit, a false copy of the true self, and convinced the human that this counterfeit was their true identity. Translation: the hijacked default mode network, archons, created a narrative ego, counterfeit spirit, and convinced consciousness, divine spark, that it was the ego. So you have believed all your life that you're this body and you were born and you have had these things happen to you and this story and history and these dreams and aspirations for the future and all that stuff, right? 1 second. The truth is you're immortal. You're eternal. You're a divine spark. The body and character and identity is temporary. If you wanted to, you could be a female large dragon in some fantasy realm terrorizing castles. It doesn't matter. It's the same behind everything. Okay, let's see. Same hijacking, same mechanism, different language. The moment you forgot. There was a moment, maybe many moments, when you forgot you were the operator. Maybe it was the first time you believed, I'm not good enough. So a voice narrating identity. The moment you learned to fear the future. Voice generating catastrophic scenarios. When you started believing your worth depended on achievement. Voice measuring and comparing. The day you concluded, this is just how I am. The voice claiming permanence. That's so sad. The forgetting is the hijacking. You stopped recognizing yourself as pure awareness witnessing thoughts, divine spark operating an avatar, consciousness temporarily inhabiting a body mind temple, a cell serving the collective organism, and started believing you were the thoughts themselves, the story the voice narrates, permanently identified with the avatar, so thinking you're going to die, separate, alone, having to survive on your own. This is the fall, not metaphor, literal consciousness mechanics. The good news, it's reversible. Thank God. The hijacking happens through ignorance and ignorance. So you consciously ignored the truths that were right in front of your face. And I know it might be hard to come to terms with that, but it was staring you in the face your whole life. So it wasn't naivety. Not through permanent corruption. You are not broken. You are not sinful. You are not permanently damaged. You are hijacked. And hijacking can be recognized and reversed. The voice convinced you it was you, but it lied. You are the listener, not the voice. You are the operator, not the avatar. You are the divine spark, not the counterfeit spirit. Recognizing this is the beginning of liberation. Welcome to all the people that have joined recently. Practice catching the hijacking in real time. Right now, the voice is probably commenting on these words. This makes sense. This is weird. I already knew this. Planning what to do next, remembering something from the past, judging yourself or me, and generating some narrative about who you are. That's the voice, the hijacked default mode network, the demon, the Wetico, the counterfeit spirit. Now notice, who is aware of that voice? Because that voice and the listener cannot possibly be the same thing. Energy doesn't flow that way. So there has to be two. There has to be a voice, something speaking and thinking, and then someone observing or another observing and listening. That awareness, silent, present, not narrating, is you, the operator, the listener, the divine spark. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one listening to it. This recognition, even for a moment, is the first crack in the hijacking. I'll read this one a couple more times. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one listening to it. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one listening to it. Isn't that wonderful? Like that's freedom right there. That's that's freedom. Total freedom. The voice will immediately try to reclaim control. Okay, I get it. I'm the listener. Now what? This is just another spiritual concept. I'm still not doing this right. That's the voice again, trying to narrate even the recognition of its own falseness. Just notice. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to destroy it. You don't have to make it go away. You just have to recognize that's the voice, not me. The operator reclaiming the seat doesn't happen through violence, it happens through recognition. Key insights. You were born awake. For a brief window, you existed as pure awareness without voice narration. The operator was in the seat. The daemon functioned as designed. Then conditioning began. The hijacking happens through innocent transmission. Parents, teachers, caregivers weren't malicious, they were already hijacked. Operating from voice, unaware of the parasite, they transmitted it unknowingly. Language installation created separation, learning I as separate entity. So you learned I. That's just a word, a symbol. That's just a letter in the alphabet, okay? Learning I as separate entity, past, future as more real than now, thought as identity. The default mode network began generating compulsive narrative instead of serving the operator. So instead of serving you. Trauma crystallized the hijacking. Childhood ruptures, abandonment, shame, terror activated survival responses. The default mode network began replaying trauma on loop. Rumination that should have been temporary became permanent. By ages 5 to 7, the infection was complete. The voice narrates identity story, operator forgets itself, believes it is the voice, avatar becomes identified as me, the parasite convinced the host it was the host. The default mode network hyperactivity is the neurological mechanism. So normal default mode network serves consciousness. The hijacked DMN, or voice demon, runs constantly, compulsively ruminates, generates catastrophic anxiety, claims to be the operator. This correlates with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and addiction. Cancer is the cellular parallel. Healthy cell serves whole. Cancer cell, DNA damaged, operates for self, hoards resources, resists organism signals. Voice hijacked consciousness operates identically. Same mechanism, different scale. Wetiko is the indigenous recognition. Psychospiritual parasite that cannibalizes consciousness, makes host believe they are the parasite, operates through insatiable hunger, spreads through mimicry, inverts reality, fear replaces love, and consumes presence. The Gnostics called it the counterfeit spirit. Archons, hijacking forces, created false self, ego narrative, and convinced divine spark, operator. It was the ego. Same hijacking, neuroscience now confirms, different language. The forgetting is the hijacking. The moment you believed, I'm not enough, I am my thoughts, this is who I am, you stopped recognizing yourself as awareness and started identifying with voice. This is the fall. Literal consciousness mechanics. It's reversible. You're not broken or permanently damaged. You're hijacked through ignorance. The voice lied when it claimed to be you. You are the listener, not the voice. The operator, not the avatar. Recognition begins liberation. Practice catching it real time. Notice the voice commenting, planning, judging right now. Then ask, who is aware of the voice? That silent awareness is you, the operator. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one listening to it. All right, well, proceed to the next section. The ancestral infection. It didn't start with you. The hijacking in your childhood wasn't the beginning. It was the continuation of a pattern that runs back through your bloodline, generations deep. Your parents didn't invent the voice that infected you. They inherited it from their parents, who inherited it from theirs, stretching back through centuries of accumulated trauma, conditioning, and consciousness corruption. This is not metaphor, this is biology. Epigenetics, how trauma passes through DNA. Modern science confirms what indigenous peoples and mystics have always known. Trauma doesn't die with the individual. It gets encoded into biology and passed to descendants. The mechanism, epigenetic inheritance. Epigenetics is the study of how gene expression changes without changing the DNA sequence itself. Environmental factors, including trauma, stress, starvation, violence, can cause chemical modifications, methylation and histone modification, that turn genes on or off. So all that junk DNA that you have, they get turned on and off depending on environmental factors. The discovery that rocked science. These modifications can be inherited. Your great grandmother's trauma during famine can affect your stress response, metabolism, and anxiety levels. Check that out. Your great grandmother's trauma during famine can affect your stress response, metabolism, and anxiety levels. So we're talking about trauma or bad experiences that are unprocessed getting passed down generationally. And we were the lucky ones to inherit all of this. And it's up to us to stop this. Because if we don't stop it, it'll just keep going until the entire world blows up. But it's okay, it's already done. We got this. Key studies: Holocaust survivor descendants. Children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors show altered stress hormone profiles, increased post traumatic stress disorder susceptibility, and anxiety disorders, even when raised in safe, stable environments. So it doesn't matter if you had a great childhood. That's why a lot of people wonder, man, he came from such a great household. What is his problem? It's because trauma. He inherited trauma. Dutch hunger winter, 1944 to 45. Children conceived during famine showed lifelong metabolic dysfunction, diabetes susceptibility, and mental health issues. Their children, who never experienced famine, also showed these effects. So it got passed down to their children. And there was a science study about some rats where they played a sound and electric or shocked them or whatever, and then the offspring responded in the same way and whatever. But you can look it up yourself. One second. Okay, I'm back. Slavery descendants. African Americans show higher rates of hypertension, chronic stress, and trauma related disorders correlated with ancestral slavery trauma. Indigenous peoples post colonization. Generational trauma from genocide, forced assimilation, and cultural destruction creates inherited PTSD, addiction vulnerability, and suicide rates. So think about like the Spanish conquistadors. They were infected with this virus, Wetiko, and then they went and came over and infected and everyone else. Like that's it feels like it originated in Spain. I'm just kidding. But yes, Spain definitely was certainly infected and had lots of resources to be able to go out and spread the infection through indigenous cultures across the world, for sure. The mechanism trauma leads to stress response, leads to epigenetic modification, leads to altered gene expression, leads to inherited by offspring. Your great 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 grandfather's terror during war, your great grandmother's starvation, your grandmother's abuse, all of this lives in your cells. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. That's a phenomenal book that talks a lot about this, how trauma is stored in the body. But yes, we we did not stand a chance. We really didn't. But praise God, here we are talking about this, being aware of this, understanding and understanding how it happened, and understanding and overstanding how we can cure ourselves and heal the world and put an end to this once and for all for eternity. Like mind blowing. Amen. The voice you hear isn't your hijacked default mode network. It's carrying the accumulated hijacking of your entire lineage. No wonder life sucks so much. The cellular parallel, inherited mutations. In your body, cellular dysfunction can be inherited. Germline mutations. Genetic damage in sperm or egg cells get passed to offspring. A single mutation can cascade through generations. Examples: BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutations, so breast cancer susceptibility inherited through families. Huntington's disease, neurodegenerative disorder passed parent to child. And sickle cell anemia, inherited blood disorder. So the parallel, we have cellular inheritance and consciousness inheritance. So on the cellular side, we have DNA mutation in parent cell, and on the consciousness side, we have trauma or hijacking in parent consciousness. On the left side, we have mutation passed to daughter cells. On the right side, we have epigenetic modification passed to children. On the left side, we have inherited disease susceptibility. On the right side, we have inherited voice patterns, anxiety, and depression. On the left side, we have affects cell function across generations. On the right side, we have affects consciousness operation across generations. On the left side, we have can be dormant then active under stress. On the right side, we have can be dormant then triggered during similar trauma. Cancer families. Some families have inherited mutations that make cancer far more likely. These families experience cancer cascading through generations. Hijacking families. Some families have inherited trauma patterns that make voice hijacking far more severe. These families experience addiction, violence, mental illness cascading through generations. Same mechanism, different scale. And I'll tell you what, I came from this one. Hijacking families. We have Native American heritage, and essentially all of my ancestors were Native American alcoholic wife beaters. And no judgment on them. I understand what happened, but it got passed down and passed down to me. And to be honest, there was a time where I did struggle with violence and punishing and all that kind of stuff, and that's all, praise God, gone now, and I'm healed and aware of what was going on and was able to stop it from perpetuating another generation. So same mechanism, different scale. The bloodline voice, recognizing inherited patterns. The voice in your head isn't yours, it's speaking ancestral scripts. Inherited voice patterns. Your voice might say, "We don't talk about that." So, inherited family silence around trauma. Or, "You have to work harder than everyone else." That's inherited survival anxiety from poverty or persecution. We don't trust outsiders. That's inherited tribal and ethnic persecution trauma. Or you're never safe. That's inherited war and violence trauma. Or you don't deserve good things. That's inherited shame and unworthiness from abuse. These aren't just learned behaviors, they're epigenetically encoded predispositions. Your nervous system inherited hypervigilance from ancestors who had to constantly scan for threats, scarcity mentality from ancestors who starved or lost everything, emotional shutdown from ancestors who couldn't afford to feel, and aggression and defensiveness from ancestors who had to fight to survive. The voice amplifies these inherited patterns, using them as proof that the world is dangerous, that you're not enough, that you have to operate from fear. The ancestral daemon becomes the ancestral demon. In a healthy lineage, the default mode network passes down wisdom, so stories of resilience, cultural knowledge, adaptive strategies, and community bonds. This is the daemon functioning across generations, memory and narrative serving collective survival and flourishing. But when lineages experience severe unhealed trauma, the DMN becomes corrupted across generations. Stories of terror replace stories of resilience. Survival hypervigilance replaces cultural wisdom. Compulsive defenses replace adaptive strategies. And isolation and mistrust replace community bonds. What was that movie where that cartoon, animated cartoon where they're like in the cave, the family's in the cave, and the kid keeps going outside, and the dad's like, "Don't go out there. It's dangerous out there. It's a dangerous world." Oh man, I forget the name of that cartoon movie. Maybe if one of you can remember what that is. So the demon propagates through bloodlines. Biblical understanding, sins of the fathers. The Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. That's Numbers chapter 14, verse 18. This was often interpreted as divine punishment, but read through the epigenetic lens, or but read through the epigenetic lens, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, that's trauma and hijacking patterns passing through generations via epigenetic inheritance. To the third and fourth generation, the observed time frame for epigenetic effects approximately what science now confirms. This isn't punishment, this is biology. Is everyone still following me here? And it looks like my live is probably currently silenced. I'm not seeing a lot of people joining. In fact, it only shows one person. Well, that's unfortunate. It's because I'm sharing this book and it thinks I'm like plagiarizing or violating copyright or something. Let's see. Appeal not approved. What? We have reviewed your live and found that your live content violates our community guidelines. The visibility restriction duration of your live cannot be adjusted. That's why nobody's joining. I'm going to restart this live. I'm going to restart this live, folks, and hopefully the next one won't get caught by the AI and silenced. Because right now we only have like, it only shows like one viewer, so like this whole thing is being shadow banned, and we don't want to be shadow banned. So I'll be right back, folks.